With week 4 fantasy football literally just hours away at this point, it's time to get into one of my personal favorite videos, which is our weekly defense rankings in fantasy football. And at the end of every single defense ranking video, I go through and I decide who the best defense to pick up is for the next week if you have a deep enough bench for you to go ahead and pick up another defense. I see the value in fantasy football defenses, and I'm one of the only fantasy football YouTubers that does defense rankings every single week in fantasy football. So please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and dive into our top 12 defenses for week 4 fantasy football. So the first defense up here is really, they've been here for 2 straight weeks now, and this team has a really good defense. It's the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the New York Jets in New York. So I've been saying this for weeks now, like I said. Kansas City has a legit defense this year. Now, I know it's easy. Like, obviously, they've had 2 easy matchups straight. Last week, they played the Chicago Bears, who are just reeling as a team. And this week, they're getting the New York Jets, who are also reeling as a team. They're about ready to fall apart as a team. The New York Jets are. This offense is absolutely awful. They're last in the league in total scoring for offense. And the Kansas City Chiefs have also had 4 turnovers forced in the last 3 games. So they can force turnovers on you guys. Like I said, it's another easy decision to put Kansas City at number 1 because they're facing a team that is near disaster, and Kansas City's defense is better than I've seen really since Patrick Mahomes took over in Kansas City. Very, very easy pick right here. And at number 2, I've got the New Orleans Saints defense taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in New Orleans this week. So here's the thing about the Saints, and you guys know this. The Saints have an elite defense. It's absolutely elite. They are literally the perfect combination of elite athleticism on the back end and complete physicality on the front end. This team is really, really good defensively. 4 interceptions through the first 3 weeks shows and highlights that athleticism they have on the back end, and 8 sacks in 3 weeks shows that physicality and athleticism they have on the front end as well. Now, here's the thing. Philadelphia gave the blueprint on how to beat Tampa Bay and how to stifle Baker Mayfield. And everybody knew this already, but if you get in Baker Mayfield's face and give him pressure, he's not the same quarterback. He turns into a laughingstock of a quarterback, actually. So they gave him the blueprint. New Orleans has a very stout front 7 as well. I think they're going to do exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles did in week 3. Moving on to our number 3 defense, it's the 49ers taking on the Arizona Cardinals in San Francisco this week. So it might feel a little bit low here, right? I mean, we're talking about a defense in fantasy football that has been absolutely stellar this year, creating turnovers, causing havoc in the backfield. This is an elite defense here. But there's a couple reasons why they're a little bit lower on the list, depending on what your perception of this is. So San Francisco has the number 10 defense in fantasy football so far. So it's not like that's bad, but they're not exactly what you would think just based on watching them and seeing the talent. And Arizona has also just been a better team than we originally thought they would be. I had to reassess this Arizona Cardinals team. They're a pretty feisty team, and offensively, they're actually putting up some points. And their offensive weapons have been better than I thought. As far as game script goes, it's not going to matter ultimately because San Francisco is going to win this game. There's no question about that. But when you look at this team as opposed to the Chiefs, and they're playing the New York Jets, this isn't a better matchup than the New York Jets are. They are the better matchup for a fantasy football defense. 49ers are still going to hold them to 10 to 14 points, but I don't expect a ton of turnovers because Arizona has played pretty clean football so far. Number 4, we've got the Eagles defense taking on the Washington Commanders in Philadelphia this week. Again, Philadelphia's defense is elite. Elite. Their front 7 is probably the best in the league. They are absolutely stacked on that front 7. I mean, they have 6 forced fumbles through 3 games. They are super physical as a team, and honestly, taking on an offense and a quarterback that is a turnover machine. Sam Howell and the Commanders got absolutely embarrassed as an offense this past week versus Buffalo. Philadelphia's defense is better than Buffalo. And not that Buffalo has a bad defense, but Philadelphia's defense is really, really stout here. This one's pretty easy peasy, man. Philadelphia's defense, do not overthink this one this week. Number 5, we've got the Cowboys defense taking on the New England Patriots in Dallas this week. So here's the thing about Dallas's defense. As great as they are as a unit, and even though Arizona's offense is better than we once thought they were, Dallas's defense did worry me a little bit, and I watched that full game. So I saw what happened throughout the whole duration, and the team not only seemed like they were mentally off just from the Trayvon Diggs injury, but they also looked like they were really lacking playmaking ability in that secondary. And that's a big deal here. So really it made me wonder, is this team going to be affected by Trayvon Diggs' absence for the full season now? It's possible, for sure. Now, I will say, of course, Micah Parsons is still a nightmare. I mean, this guy literally is like being compared to Lawrence Taylor. He's like the modern day Lawrence Taylor. I don't know if I would go that far, but he's a very, very good player. And he's clearly one of the best defensive players, if not the very best in the league. This team is also pissed off after a bad loss. They've got a good matchup here. Still really, really confident in the Cowboys defense. Number 6, we've got the Colts defense, man, taking on the Los Angeles Rams in Indianapolis this week. I said it weeks ago on the Indianapolis Colts defense. They have a real defense, and they honestly have a real team, period. They're the number 6 defense in fantasy football right now. And what I'm about to read you is impressive. And you can see it on the screen as well, what they're doing per game. But they are tied for second in sacks through 3 weeks with 12. They also have 7 forced fumbles in 3 weeks as well. This is a physical defense here, and they've got Shaq Leonard back, and it has all become a really, really good unit here. And on top of that, Los Angeles, they're starting to show some cracks like I thought they would before the season started. The offensive line is tragically bad. Stafford got beaten down last week versus the Cincinnati Bengals, who are not as good defensively as the Indianapolis Colts here. I think he could be in for another beatdown this week against the Indianapolis Colts. They're probably one of my favorite defensive plays of the week. Number 7, I've got the Bengals taking on the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee this week. So while Matt Stafford, as we just talked about, was beaten down, Cincinnati was the one issuing that beatdown. They've got a really good pass rushing duo. I mean, they've got Hendrickson and they've got Hubbard on the other side, and those two form a really good duo when they're both playing well. And Tennessee's offensive line is not very good. Tennessee's offense as a whole is not very good at all. So I think that this is a great matchup here. I love the matchup. Cincinnati's defense back inside the top 10 again this week. Moving on to 8, I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers defense in the top 12 again versus the Houston Texans in Houston this week. I also said this one last week. The only reason that Pittsburgh is probably going to be in this rankings video several more times throughout the season is because of 2 reasons. Number 1, they get after your quarterback. They have 13 sacks through 3 weeks. That's a really impressive number through 3 weeks. And they also create turnovers. That's number 2. They have 8 turnovers through 3 weeks. But their problem is they give up a lot of yards, both on the run game and through the pass. They just don't hold opponents to really a small amount of yardage. They can let their opponents get plenty of big yards. This game's in Houston this week. They're probably going to force CJ Stroud into a couple turnovers here. So they're definitely going to be inside my top 8. But Pittsburgh's defense is very volatile in fantasy football. Number 9, we've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans this week. So honestly, I didn't even realize how good Tampa Bay's defense still is. And honestly, I should have known, because Tampa Bay has had a really good defense for several straight years now. Since Tom Brady days, they've had a really good defense. In fantasy football, they're a very good defense as well. They're the number 5 defense in fantasy football through 3 weeks. 9 sacks, 5 interceptions, man. They've got some real playmakers on the defensive side of the ball here. Now, the matchup is perfect. That is a turnover-happy defense because they're taking on Jameis Winston, who is very well known for being generous to opposing defenses as far as giving the ball back. I'm expecting a couple turnovers in this matchup, and while I don't expect Tampa to win, I do expect them to give plenty of opportunities to win. Moving on to number 10, we've got the Houston Texans versus the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. So obviously we've got 2 defenses in the same matchup here, which would indicate to you that I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. And that's exactly what I think. And it sounds crazy to have the Houston Texans defense inside of the top 10, let alone the top 12. In the history of this channel, I don't think I've ever ranked the Houston Texans defense in my top 12 defensive rankings on any single week. They also never had DeMeco Ryans before this year as well. DeMeco Ryans is changing this defense, and I said it leading up to the season that they would become a better defensive unit throughout the year. This defense is aggressive, man. They've got 5 turnovers in 3 weeks, And Pittsburgh, while they have won their last 2 games, their offense is still a laughingstock. Don't let the 2 wins straight fool you. Houston is getting a good matchup here, and it's probably not going to be the last time that Houston is inside my top 12 this year. Number 11, Patriots defense taking on the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. Again, indication that 2 defenses in the same matchup here is going to be a lower scoring game, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen in this New England versus Dallas game. New England's defense is number 17 in fantasy football this year, but don't let that number fool you. Remember who they have played during the season so far. Week 1, took on Philadelphia. Week 2, the best offense in football, Miami. They got a break last week, and they were very good defensively on fantasy football as a result of that. And on top of all that, the Cardinals have showed the blueprint on how the Dallas Cowboys are beat. You slow down the run, and you make Dak Prescott throw the ball. That's exactly what I expect New England to do this week, and I do believe that they will have some success doing it. I think that the Cowboys are going to win this game, but I do think that New England's defense is going to keep this one close, and thus is a very good defensive play in fantasy football this week. Number 12, we've got the Vikings rounding it out, taking on the Carolina Panthers in Carolina this week. Now, let's make this one very, very clear right out of the gate. Minnesota's defense is bad. And I really hate that I have to put them inside my top 12 because they're the number 28 defense in fantasy football through 3 weeks. But Carolina's offense is just as bad as Minnesota's defense. They are awful offensively. And really the reason the Vikings are here is because looking across the league, there's a lot of competitive matchups with really high scoring potential in week 3. That's the reason the Vikings defense are here. I wouldn't prefer to start them, but I do acknowledge being inside my top 12, they're not the worst defensive play in week 3. And as promised, my bonus defensive pickup if you are in a deeper league and you have a deeper bench, or if you just have an open spot in your bench that you can add for next week, is going to be the Detroit Lions. They will be taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 5. Now, here's the thing about Detroit's defense. They're very low percentage roster. They're about 5% rostered in ESPN leagues right now. So they're widely available right now, and Detroit's defense has been very good in fantasy football this year. It's an improving defense with Dan Campbell as head coach, and they're the number 12 defense in fantasy football right now. They've had 8 total sacks, and Aiden Hutchinson continues to grow. So I do expect Detroit to have a good week against the Tampa Bay offense that, like I said earlier, has a bad offensive line, and all they have to do is get pressure in Baker Mayfield's face. So let me know what you think of the defensive rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for week 4 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 12 tight end rankings for week 4 fantasy football, click on this video right here.